Welcome to Potter Revisited, episode 21. Today we are discussing chapter 3 of Chamber of Secrets, The Burrow.
Or, as we like to call it, Grand Theft Auto.
Or better yet, Weasley Grand Theft Auto, because of all the crime they commit.
There's a lot of crime.
Before we jumped in, I just wanted to talk about that. I love the description of just the Weasleys in their house because I feel like I relate to it so much because growing up, my house was like the hub where you had everyone over.
Yep, yes it was.
My parents were like the Weasleys where you just like wanted to have everyone over all the time.
Yeah, we were always at your house.
All right, so starting off, I love that at least one person is concerned about Harry, and it's Ron, even though Ron is literally 12 and an adult probably should have done something at this point. But, you know,
Yep.
adults aren't like smart in the Harry Potter series.
I wonder if the twins were aware of how horrible Harry's home situation was and were on board for that, like, okay, he's being abused, he needs to be rescued. Or do you think they had no idea and Ron was like, we need to rescue Harry, and they're like, stealing a car, driving without a license, trespassing, kidnapping, we're in.
I think it's a bit of both, because we know that Ron's brought this up to his parents like a lot, like, Harry's not responding, I am very concerned. And they did say when he gets there that, like, Mr. Weasley was planning to do something if they hadn't heard by, like, a certain date. But I just feel like Ron was venting to the twins because he's probably the closest to them, being like, oh, like, I haven't heard from Harry, like, and I know that his aunt and uncle, like, aren't very nice. And then, like, I wish I could just go get him. And the twins are like, hey, this sounds like an adventure. We're down.
Time for some trouble.
So at this point, we know that Ron's 12 and the twins are probably about 2 years older than him.
Yeah.
So how would they be, 15?
Or 14. Yeah. I don't know what the driving age is in the UK. But I highly doubt they have licenses or learner's permits because most wizards don't fly. So, like, they wouldn't know to go get a driver's license.
I mean, that's probably, like, a country thing. Like, the Weasleys grew up in, like, a kind of a farm country. I know people that live in, like, rural areas, they, like, don't technically have learner's permits, but they learn how to drive pretty young because, like, there's nothing out there.
Yeah, dirt road driving.
And we start off that the twins and Ron arrive at Harry's window, and they're in a flying car, and they've come to rescue him and bring them back to their house. And my one thing is, did no one notice this flying car that was just, like, parked in midair by Harry's window? Like, does no one at Privet Drive, like, wake up at, like, 2 a.m. for, like, a glass of water or something and just see this out their window?
Maybe they've got a tree in the front yard. I don't know. I think on the off chance that someone was up and looking out their window that early, they probably would assume they're dreaming or hallucinating. Or it's just Mrs. Fig and she's like, meh. Typical. Classic wizard shenanigans.
So, Harry's stuff is locked in the cupboard under the stairs, and the twins just so happen to know how to pick a lock, which just seems so fitting.
Yeah. It seems a little bit like a cheat, like, oh, and they happen to know how to pick locks.
Yeah.
But I kind of like it in that you could totally see Mr. Weasley as the kind of guy who has a bunch of, like, muggle padlocks lying around at home just to mess with. And, like, I wonder what these do. How do they work? And then the twins, like, oh, Dad has this thing that he plays with. We should figure out how to cheat it. You know? Cheat code locks.
I feel like it's just up the twins' alley. Like, they have the kind of minds where they want to know how things work and how to, like, because they're always, like, messing around with something in their bedroom, as Ron says later in, like, the book.
Yeah.
So I just feel like they just were, like, saw a padlock or some kind of lock, and they're like, you know what would be cool if we could learn how to open this without magic.
Yeah. They have an interesting mindset for wizards, because I feel like most wizards would find something like, I don't know how to open it, or I don't know how to do this. And the first response would be, oh, I need to find a magic way to get through this. But the twins are too, like, creative and deceptive. They're just as interested in non-magical options as magical ones.
Yeah, they definitely have a creative brain and, like, how they interpret stuff, and, like, especially for wizards, because wizards just I feel like once you have magic, it kind of, like, you don't think outside of that, but they're very much outside the box thinkers.
Absolutely. There is no box.
Despite Vernon's best efforts, Harry is able to get all his stuff into the Weasley's car, almost forgetting Hedwig, but thankfully, Hedwig is not one to be forgotten.
Thank goodness for Hedwig.
So he runs back and gets her, and Harry's like, classic sassy Harry, where he's just like, see you next summer, as he's leaving.
Love sassy Harry. I love the whole rescue mission. It's such a cute, fun romp, you know? It's fun, it's lighthearted. It's one of the things I love about the earlier books before the world gets too serious. That's just pure fun. I love it. The breakout attempts.
Ron tells Harry to let Hedwig just stretch her wings, And I'm just like, poor Hedwig's, like, if she hasn't been out since, like, Harry returned, that's like a month that she's just been, like, in this, like, static position.
Yeah, she's gonna have been having a really, really rough go of it. I also think, speaking of creatures or beings that are grotesquely mistreated, they talk about Dobby and refer to him by saying who owns him. And that's just such a...
Yeah, it's just very jarring.
Yeah, it's kind of an unexpected thing to pop up in, like, a kid's book. I mean, I think it's good. I think kids should know about the realities of the world, and there are inequalities like that, and those things exist. But, like, it's jarring the first time. You're like, wait, that, like, talking character with a personality and, like...
And its own thoughts and feelings.
Is owned by someone? That's horrendous.
So they talk about why Harry couldn't get, like, his letters, which was Dobby, and so he explains the whole house story. And, yeah, Fred and George kind of explain the backstory, like, oh... like he has masters and they have really powerful magic, but they can't use it unless their master says it's okay, and only rich family owns them, and they're passed down through generations. And it's just like Fred and George are like early teens, and it's just like the whole, like, then they don't even think about it. It's just like how we talked about kind of last episode with the way Ron kind of describes house elves being like, oh, they like being enslaved, but it's just like that's the society they grew up in, but we're seeing it through like our own perspective from our own worldview, and it's just like having a creature that is sentient and like has thoughts and feelings and personality. The idea that someone owns him and he's not like free abled is like it's just so disturbing.
Yeah, and it's so hard to see that coming from characters who are intrinsically good. The idea that the Weasleys are even like, oh yeah, wizards own house elves, it's fine. It's so shocking because they're such an example of, like, goodness.
Yeah, but it really shows that, like, not everyone, like, you can be good, but you can still have, like, gray views.
Yeah, huge sort of blind spots to certain issues that you just don't even consider. Certainly, yeah.
So I was wondering, we talked a bit about this last episode, but I was wondering, so Fred or George, I can't remember which one, but one of them says that house elves have really powerful magic that they're not allowed to use. So I was wondering what kind of powerful magic that they have.
I mean, I always just thought it was a completely different, like, school of magic or, like, source of magic. You know what I mean? Like almost like every type of magic is a different element, sort of, and wizards are fire and elves are earth, sort of. Like, it just comes from a different place, or originates from some other part of them, and it's a completely different, like, language of magic. Because like, they don't have to recite spells, they don't have to have wands, they don't have wand movements.
Yeah, they don't have the restriction of, like, I think wizards' magic has to go through them to their wand to be able to use it.
Yeah.
At least safely, because we know, like, as kids, you do magic by accident, but it's very, like...
And wandless magic is the thing that you learn once you're advanced.
More controlled. But I feel like house elves have that ability where, like, they're able to just apparate wherever they want. And we know Dobby, like... basically defends Harry from Lucy's at the end of the book using some kind of like really powerful stunning spell.
Yeah.
So they have some kind of magic, and they're not like, basically they don't have to do it through a wand. They can just do it. They have a lot of control. So if they weren't controlled by wizards, they'd probably be very powerful.
Absolutely. 100%. And it's neat magic. It's cool. It's neat that it's not restricted in the same way magical, like wizard magic is restricted. It's interesting how poorly people, it's how like, what a missed opportunity it is for people to, like, befriend house elves and, like, learn from them about their type of magic and, like, work together to do good magical things. And instead, they're taking these wonderful, sometimes insightful, clever, friendly house elves and just having them do, like, basic housework and, like, chores and, like, when they could actually really probably contribute a lot to the way magical society runs.
Feels like since wizards were forced into hiding from, like, I guess Muggles and like the witch trials and stuff in the past, that once they met other creatures that probably had the same magic ability as them or more powerful, they're like, now we're gonna force you below us.
Yeah, it's such a...
And it's just a cycle, because we see that with all the creatures, like with the goblins too. It's just like the goblins work for the wizards, and we know goblins could have more magic, but the wizards were restricting it because they want to control them.
Yeah. Wizards are kind of assholes. I mean, not all of them, but their society is structured on inequality and subjugation of others, and it's pretty douchey overall. In regards to, like, foreshadowing, a lighter topic to that, it's interesting how on page 29 they already suspect that Dobby could be the Malfoy's elf. It's like early on. Pretty good thinking on the part of the kids.
Yeah, because Harry kind of like, because we don't know kind of like what old wizard families are, and we get more to that later in the series, but Harry kind of already interprets that Malfoy's a very well-off person, and Malfoy talks about his parents all the time, so he kind of interprets like, oh, Malfoy's probably like an old family name, and the fact that the Weasleys like know who the Malfoys are.
He definitely, I mean, I'm sure Draco says it a lot first year. He's like, I'm from one of the most respectable pure-blood families, blah, 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 blah.
You can trace me back 5 generations or more.
All the way back, or else you don't know for certain that they're pure blood.
Speaking of foreshadowing, Lucius Malfoy was suspected of being in a Death Eater, but he claimed that he was under the Imperial Curse, and Mr. Weasley suspects out of, like, no, he has no evidence, but he suspects that Lucius was in the Inner Circle, which is true. Mr. Weasley he knows.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably an air of confidence that Malfoy carries himself with. Like, I feel like in, like, a cult society, sort of like the Death Eaters are, once you've reached a certain level of closeness to the Dark Lord, you see yourself as being superior to so many people around you that you can carry yourself with that air of superiority, and Lucius Malfoy has that with almost everyone. So it just feels like the way he acts is representation of his status in that group. So it's like, wow, you're a real pretentious dick. You must be pretty close to the Dark Lord. Correct.
Turns out to be true. So, Harry asks about Mr. Weasley and what he does, because Ron's kind of provided like what his siblings are doing, but not what his dad does. So his dad works in the Ministry, and the kids don't seem very interested that he's working in protecting Muggle artifacts for Muggles and just anything to do with Muggles. But I do think it's kind of a really important job, because that protects like the sacredity or the secrecy of the wizards, and I just feel like they make it seem like it's just like accounting, like my dad's an accountant, and they make it seem like it's like that.
I think probably part of it is that like it's not the most exciting job. Like it's probably a lot of like research and investigating and paperwork, because I feel like the Aurors are the ones who would get sent out to do a lot of like the big confrontations. So it's probably pretty boring, like desk job most of the time, writing up bills and stuff and laws, and I think that's of no interest to kids. Like I can see that being of no interest to younger kids, especially when the Weasley kids are still purebloods who probably don't have a lot of interaction with like Muggle children, so they're like, oh, dad fights objects that are slightly enchanted. Oh no, mom's evil whisk and blender are coming to get the Muggles.
I think especially being like a young boys, like back then when my brother was young, he was interested in like more like exciting careers. And now he's an accountant. But back then, like you're looking for things that are exciting for you because attention spans and everything. And
exactly, it's not a flashy job.
Office jobs don't seem very interesting to you when you're like 13.
Yeah, exactly, and especially when you don't understand the actual risk of it. And it's hard for them to take the threat and danger of enchanted Muggle objects seriously when their dad sort of abuses that law at home so much. Like, they're like, okay, enchanted Muggle artifacts are dangerous, but not so dangerous that we shouldn't just have them in our house.
Yeah, speaking of that, I was just like, it doesn't really seem smart for Mr. Weasley to be writing these laws about protecting Muggle artifacts and then just bringing things home and doing what he wants with them. Like, he says he's just seeing how it works, but we know he's doing more, and his kids know he's doing more. So it just seems just like such a big risk to take for someone who's just like
in the government job.
Yeah, doesn't really have a lot of savings and has a lot of kids. Like he has a lot of like responsibilities.
Yeah. And to be fair, I feel like people who make the laws are often the people who break them the most. They write in their own loopholes, much like Mr. Weasley did in those laws, where he's allowed to have them if he's just doing research or learning. But I also think it's a little bit less of a risk because they probably live far away from the city. They don't live near Muggles and they don't interact with Muggles a lot. So worst case scenario is his wizard children take his Muggle artifacts that are enchanted like they do. But it's a lot less risky than someone who, say, lives in the city right around a bunch of Muggles. And even more so when people intentionally enchant the objects with malicious intent. Like, they're like, I'm intentionally going to enchant this object to piss off Muggles, to hurt Muggles, to scare Muggles. So I think there's a little bit of the intent to it. At some point, it's like Mr. Weasley could be charged with, like, negligence. But people who had malicious intent could be charged with, like, assault or homicide, you know?
Yeah.
Wizard law.
The twins and Ron bring Harry, and they pull up to their house, which is called the Burrow, which is so cute.
The first thing I want to say about the Burrow is it sounds like the most warm, cozy, and yet, like, cluttered, delightful place. Like, it gives me like Hobbit hole feelings, even though it's like a tall house with a bunch of floors and not a hole. It just feels close but like a good sense of cramped. Like, there's not enough room cramped, but like there's so many things and you're close and cozy, and like It's such a perfect name for it. It really is.
I was just thinking about this while rereading the chapter that most of the places that we go to in Harry Potter, all like the residents have like names. Like the Weasley's place is called the Burrow. There's Grimmauld Place. There's Harry's place in Godric Hollow. Like they all have like kind of like names. And is that like a wizarding tradition?
I think it's an English tradition. Like in a lot of the shows, I watch a lot of like Midsummer Murders and stuff, and it's like, oh yes, up at the old Hodgley estate, and like it might not be the Hodgleys that live there, like it was named after the original family who lived there, so now that estate has a name that sticks around.
That makes sense.
So and in the case of like Grimmauld Place, it's the street name, so I feel like it's just like referring to places. Like I lived on a street called Johnson for a while, and whenever I refer to something that happened there, I'm like, oh, and we were at the Johnson house, you know? So I feel like the British just take that a step further and have a nice fancy sign.
I love the image of the Burrow. So it's basically a farmhouse that had like extra like extensions added on top of it with the more kids they had.
Yeah.
And I think that the films, at least in the beginning, had a really good. I love like the way they interpreted the house.
Yeah.
Especially in the Chamber of Secrets movie, just looks like it could fall down at any moment.
Yeah, I love that. Kind of like the Weasleys. They're unorganized and they're a mess, but somehow they're keeping it together.
So when they arrive at the Burrow, Mrs. Weasley ends up catching them. And I was just wondering what her relationship with the twins is like at this point, because we know the Weasleys are a close family and like they all love each other, etc., etc. But she seems really hard on the twins, and at this point she's really upset, and she's comparing the twins to Bill, Charlie, and Percy a lot of the time, and it happens a lot in like the next few books, and it just feels like I was wondering if this is maybe part of the reason why their relationship with Percy is so strained, because you can definitely people can relate to being like, oh, why aren't you more like your brother? And it doesn't really help your relationship with them, because Percy didn't do all these things just to be praised. He did them because he's an ambitious kid.
It's the kind of person he is. It's what he wanted to be doing.
He probably did part of it to be like something good for his parents to like praise him for, because we know Percy likes praise, but also Percy just wants more out of life. But I just feel like the twins, especially in the next book, have like, they're just like really, their relationship's a bit more strained, I find.
I think part of it is that Mrs. Weasley had a bunch of kids, and it seems like the earlier kids were fairly well behaved. Like, I'm sure they got in their bit of trouble, but overall they were pretty good kids, you know, head boy and all that. So I think she got like a false understanding of what teenagers were like. She was like, okay, they're going to work hard, they're going to study. And then Fred and George were so out of left field. Like, Ron is the middle ground, sort of, when it comes to, like, stumbling into trouble. But they didn't get Ron first, they got the twins first. So they went from, like, really well-behaved kids who, like, want to do well in school and prioritize the things they prioritize, to the twins who like seek out trouble. And it's a little bit being shocked, like, how did I create these kids, and a little bit like, what are their motivations, because I have no idea.
Yeah, I feel like at this point she doesn't really know how to manage them, because also the twins are a lot different, I think, than Bill, Charlie, and Percy. Like, Charlie was definitely more into things that weren't academics, but the twins is just like the way they think and the way like their personalities are, and there's two of them as well. It's just different. Like, especially we will go into it more with their career objectives and like how they clash with their mom over that. But it's just like Mrs. Weasley doesn't really quite understand them.
I mean, it's also, they're very sort of like a classic family. Like, they've got like a stay-at-home mom. The dad has a desk job for the government. They sort of have like a traditional idea of how things are going to go for their family, and the twins are out here being like, no, we're going to be rock stars, and have like, they're just sort of not intentionally, but it probably feels like they're just rebelling against everything the family stands for. They're like, probably feel like the way we feel when we look at Percy, where like, oh, you think you're too good for the Weasleys and you think you're too good for your own family. Maybe there's times where the Weasley parents are like, oh, the twins think they're too good or too smart or too something to just be happy with this lifestyle and like living this way, you know?
We do kind of notice that like the Weasley's dynamic is kind of like you said, Mrs. Weasley's like the stay-at-home mom and like the homemaker. Mr. Weasley has a desk job. We also notice that Mrs. Weasley's kind of the more disciplinarian, where Arthur is more of like, he just kind of goes with the flow with whatever Mrs. Weasley said. But if things are like really serious, like, you know, when he says, okay, that's enough, that he's like that's when you've gone too far.
Yeah. Certainly, It's a very relatable sort of family dynamic, which is nice. And it's interesting to see how they treat the different children based on the types of things the children do and the way the children are. I feel like we were all a little deprived from not really getting much of Charlie, because I think maybe Charlie had more in common with the twins than the other siblings maybe at times, and we didn't get to really see that, which might have given us a bit more of a perspective. But I definitely think it's just hard to have had kids that were pretty much straight arrows and then get the twins, and sometimes feel like they're causing trouble for the sake of trouble, you know?
Especially being like, that's like your fourth kid is it's actually 4 and 5. Because I feel like having twins when you already had 3 kids, probably like 1 to 2 years apart, is a lot. So she probably, like I say with like big families, like you don't get really like the close one-on-one time as much as you would if you had less kids. So I think a lot of the Weasley boys, at least, and probably maybe Jenny, do feel like maybe like they don't feel they have like insecurity issues. Like we get that a lot of Ron, and it's because they have all these like perceived notions about how they're perceived by their family.
Yeah, it's definitely like a competition for the parents' attention and praise for sure in that family. I also think that maybe a part of it with the twins is that they are twins. Like, the family was already kind of struggling financially, and then Miss Weasley gets pregnant, and there's 2 of them. And, like, I don't have kids, and I don't have twins, but I can imagine it's probably hard. Like, as soon as one baby twin falls asleep, the other one starts crying, and it's like, you have to take care of them. And, you know, like, you don't get it. I mean, it's probably like that with all children, but it's probably worse when there's 2 of them at the same age. I don't know. Stressful. I would have given them both back. No babies.
It's a lot. We finally also get a glimpse of Ginny.
Ginny! She's just this adorable, awkward, but she becomes such a badass. That's one of the things I love about Ginny as a book character, is that Hermione sort of came off kind of a certain way early on, and then sort of quickly becomes sort of like this almost perfect ideal. I mean, in the book, she's a little more flawed, but she's so smart and she does so well in school. It's a little bit unattainable. But Ginny is sort of this really interesting lower ground where you see her awkward, weird stage where she's uncomfortable and has a crush on the celebrity or her brother's friend. And then you really see her stop caring about how she's seen and become just like this little badass who does what feels right and has fun. And she is such a relatable character to me, I find. Like, she's so down to earth. And you can easily see so much of yourself in her.
Yeah.
Or at least I can.
I do like that she's like the kind of like she's not too similar to Hermione, because I feel like at least at the beginning of these books, like the only like main girl character that gets a lot of screen time, I would say, is Hermione, because she's the main character. And then like Ginny doesn't become a really big figure until book 5, and I just like that they're all very like different, because I just feel like sometimes like female characters get written a certain way.
Yeah, into really boring archetypes.
Yeah, and I just like that for the main girls that Hermione, Luna, and Ginny are all they're all great characters, but they're all completely different.
Yeah, I agree.
And I like that there's more variety to it.
And they're strong in different ways, and like they handle things differently. Like,
yeah, they have different like strengths and weaknesses.
And I kind of love the young feminist icon Ginny is. Just like, I don't care if my brothers are also in this pub, I'm gonna make out with my boyfriend because I can and I want to, and no one will shame me because I don't give a shit. Like, it's such a like, yeah, Ginny, you do you, girl. Yeah, like, it's just, she's just like, couldn't care less what the brothers think or anyone else here. And it's awesome.
So when when Ron takes Harry out to the garden to denome it as their punishment, I just kind of figured out that in the UK, a backyard is what we would call it, is generally referred to as the garden. But when I think of a garden, I think of like plants and like a garden with flowers and like vegetables and stuff. But to them, that it's just like the backyard space. So it kind of like changed the way I perceive the Weasleys like house, because I think when I was thinking of it, I was just thinking of like a garden area, but now it's just like their whole backyard. And
okay.
Like, how it's described, like Harry describes that it's like very overrun and like not like super neat and precise like the Privet Drive is. And I love the idea that Weasley just having like these crazy plants and they have gnomes running everywhere, and it's not super kept up, but it's just like it feels more like someone lives there.
Yeah, absolutely. Homey. Like, I picture, like, there's probably some weeds growing, but there's also probably, like, wildflowers, and, like, that's my favorite, you know? Mrs. Weasley doesn't have time to, like, keep a perfect, flawless garden and always have the lawn trimmed. She's busy. She's got too many children. So, I like the idea of the sort of unkept, long grass, gnomes all over the place. It It makes me happy. I also would love to denome the garden. Like, I don't want to abuse the gnomes because they're adorable, but I remember a game on the original Pottermore where you denome the Weasley's garden.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
And you, like, chuck them to see how far they could go. And, like, I don't know. It just seems like fun. It seems like the weirdest punishment chore ever.
All the old Harry Potter video games, that was usually a thing for Chamber of Secrets, was denoming the garden.
Yeah, kind of tragic it was left out of the movies. Not that it was that important, but it would have been really cute to see.
One thing I like is Mr. Weasley comes back after his work day, and he's talking about an incident from work, and he name drops Mundungus Fletcher, which is so cute because, like, I think there's 2 Mundungus Fletcher name drops until we meet him in Order of the Phoenix. But I love hearing about the characters and just kind of like, especially because Mundungus is a criminal, so he's like, oh, Mundungus Fletcher was doing this, and then we meet him later, and it's just like a little criminal.
Yeah. Very little criminal.
And we always meet him when he's doing crime.
Yeah, that's what he's known for. He's just out. I mean, to be fair, most of the characters have done crime at this point.
Yeah.
Especially the children. But it's funny. We're like, oh, he's a criminal. He steals whatever, cauldrons. Meanwhile, it's like Fred and George steal cars and abduct children, but that's cool in the Harry Potter context. Oh, childhood morality. I love it.
So Ron takes Harry up to his room for the first time, and Ron's kind of nervous about this because we know Ron has a lot of insecurity about, like, his parents' like financial status and, like, not having the best of everything, and especially because he knows Harry lives with wealthy Muggles, despite the fact that they, like, abuse him.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that Ron has, like, his Quidditch team that's, like, he's, like, super diehard for, that is, like, last in the league, and it just reminds me of, like, Maple Leafs fans here in Toronto.
Hey, my team was last in the league this year, okay?
Yeah, but, like, the Leafs are always last.
They're bad. They're really, the Leafs are a curse. I mean, your team is a curse. My team's had some good seasons. We made it to a Stanley Cup final. You know, we've been having some moments. Your team is cursed. Are you saying, is this the hot take? Are the Chudley Cannons the Toronto Maple Leafs of Quidditch? That's the take?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's quite the take, because I just don't know if, like, I know Ron is like, they're always last, but they got like a really great team, and it just reminds me of, like, when my brother and my dad talk about the Leafs.
It's exactly what Leafs fans are like. They're like, we might have lost in the first round again, but Austin Matthews.
Well, next year it'll be it, and I just feel I feel like it's just like that blind, like, hope, or just like the underdog especially.
I am, as a blind sports fan who blindly supports her team most of the time, I completely understand it. I'm like, yeah, we were last in the league, but gosh, Cole Caulfield could have won a Calder if he'd had a real coach earlier in the season. Like, for sure. It's what we are. We can't help it. And it also really humanizes Ron a bit more, for, like, he's more relatable to people, to be like, oh, he's just like a regular kid who really, really loves his favorite sports team, even when they suck.
It definitely feels like a boy's room, because it has, like, he has the posters all over the wall of his favorite Quidditch team. And it kind of goes back to, like, Harry finally being in a magical place where he can talk about Quidditch, because that's one of the things he missed most. And just, like, Ron had these, like, little comics about, like, a Muggle. And it's just bringing the magic back into the series now that we finally left the Dursleys.
Yeah, and they do a great job of that. It's a nice... I love how Harry isn't, like, negatively overwhelmed with the Weasley's house. Like, obviously it's lovely, so you wouldn't have negative feelings. But, like, the big sort of whiplash of going from, like, Muggle this, Muggle that, don't even think the word magic, to, like, don't mind all the magic and the ghoul in the attic.
Yeah, magic just, like, exposed every corner. But the one thing Ron mentions is that his room is right below the attic where the ghoul lives. And I'm just wondering, how did the Weasleys end up with a ghoul? And also, what is the difference between a ghoul and a ghost?
Oh, well, ghosts are the soul of a once-living wizard and or potentially Muggle. But ghouls, I feel, are always ghouls, so they're not like a end result of death. And I also kind of feel like ghouls probably seek out, like, dark, cramped, isolated spaces. So things like attics and basements are sort of perfect. Maybe swamps, caves, you know? And also, if they're magical creatures, they probably prefer those, like, dark, cramped places around magic, you know?
Yeah. Maybe the magic, like, I don't know, they need the magic around or something for their energy.
Yeah. Miss Weasley has too many kids to clean up after. She doesn't have time to go looking through the attic, so he seems to be safe there. Why they never de-ghouled the attic, I don't know.
Yeah, I just don't know what the point of the ghoul was, but, like, the ghoul actually does come back and plays, like, a pretty big part later, like, at the very end of the series. So it's cool to see, like, everyone's like, I got the stupid ghoul in the attic.
It does nothing good for us, helps us in no way ever, cannot imagine a single circumstance in which a ghoul could be helpful.
He's like, oh, it's so annoying, it's the worst, and then the ghoul comes in handy.
Good job, ghoul.
So one thing you mentioned is that Ron is very insecure with Harry being, like, at his house, despite rescuing him.
Yeah, it's definitely I think it's definitely a the grass is greener on the other side situation. So Ron, knowing Harry, A, is rich individually, but also came from a well-off household, thinks that Harry will judge him for not having nice fancy things and a super clean, shiny house. But I think it's the kind of thing where, like, it's Ron's own personal anxiety because that's not the person Harry is. But I think it's nice because it again, it's like another level of humanization for Ron. Every single person out there has anxieties about things that probably aren't a realistic issue, and they don't need to be so insecure about it, but they are because that's just humanity. So it's really interesting to see Ron's early on, to see, like, this is one of Ron's big problems. Even with people who wouldn't judge him for it or don't care, it's going to continue to be a bit of an issue for him.
Yeah, we definitely see that Ron cares a lot about what Harry thinks, and Ron always, like, he equals money to being better because he's never had it, but Harry has, like, generally what he would assume is nice things, but Harry, who's, like, just used to, like, living, like, in squalor, and Harry's just not used to, like, it's more just, like, I guess, not physical, like.
It's the emotional richness of love and friendship and family. And
because one thing, we'll talk about this later, but, like, Harry just feels that people generally like him at the Burrow, and he's not used to, like, being in a home where people don't, like,
hate him,
avoid him, or mistreat him, and people want to talk to him and want his opinions on things.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, people sort of always take for granted a bit what they have, and so Ron doesn't realize how valuable a family that just generally likes you is, because he's never not had that.
Yeah, the Weasleys are definitely rich in a different way, in, like, their family and their love and just, like, how they live their life.
Like, if Ron needed a kidney, you know what I mean? He's set. There's loads of people who'd give him a kidney. Harry, not so much.
If Harry needed a kidney, the Dursleys would be like, bye.
Yeah.
Like, oh, sorry, we sold your kidneys.
We sold your kidney, you know, since you're gonna die anyway, we figured.
Do you have anything else you want to discuss about the Weasleys or the Burrow before we wrap up?
Oh my gosh, I could talk for hours about the Burrow. I would say one of my favorite things about the Burrow is Miss Weasley's magic clock.
Yes.
I wish I knew backstory to that clock. I want to know, like, where she got it from, if it was, like, a gift, who enchanted it, because it seems like some pretty cool tracking magic.
Yeah, I was wondering if it was more, like, from the war, because we know Mrs. Weasley's backstory. I'm pretty sure it's established canon that she had two brothers that died in the war.
Yep, Fabian and Gideon.
Who were then, like, Fred and George were the homage to them. And I feel like, that mirror, because the clock has all these, like, things, but it also has, like, mortal peril, and just, like, I just feel like something, like if she was, by then she would have been married and had, like at least Bill and Charlie. Like, I just feel like knowing where everyone was, like, maybe it would probably have, like, different hands. Like, maybe she wanted to know where her brothers were, where Mr. Weasley was, which is where people were, because at the time of the war, it was, like, you didn't really know what was happening.
Does that mean that, like, when her brothers died, she had to, like, take their hands off the clock? And when, like, her next child was born, she had to, like, pin a new hand on the board? Like, oh, good, 2 twins. Like,
that's traumatic.
Right? Or is it, like, automatic and enchanted? Like, you wake up one day, you go look at the clock, and there's a hand missing, and you're like, oh, shit, he's dead.
What do you think happened when Fred died at the end of Deathly Hallows? Like, what, did his hand just stay there?
My heart broke. That's what happened. I bet... yeah, I feel like Fred's hand fell off or needs to be removed, or because he's always going to be in George's heart, it's sort of, like, stuck to George's arrow. So whenever George's arrow goes somewhere, Fred's, like, drags along with it.
Aw, that makes me want to cry, but also it's really sweet.
I'm here to make you cry.
I need to sue for emotional damage from the Fred death. I feel like a lot of them were rough on Deathly Hallows, but that was the one that I wasn't expecting for some reason. I don't know why I probably should have expected a Weasley to die, but I wasn't expecting one of the twins.
I wasn't expecting, no. I think it's cruel.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying it's so cruel.
I know that's, like, hard. Like, It's so cruel because, like, she killed Fred and it sucks, but she destroyed George and makes him live. Like, I don't want either of the twins to die, but it's heartbreaking to think that one of the twins died. The idea that he has to, like, wake up every day for the rest of his life and look in the mirror to brush his teeth and see Fred staring back at him, like, makes me so upset. Like, neither of them should have died, but killing one of them is just... When Miss Weasley sees the Boggart, she sees all of her families dying. And when she sees the twins, they're dying together. Because even in her worst possible fears, she couldn't imagine Fred and George not being together. Like, it rips my heart out.
Not good times.
I don't want to talk about
it. This episode took a dark turn. Just talk trauma. If you were also traumatized by Fred's death, let us know.
Yeah, if you talk about it in therapy, same.
We'll start a support group.
All right, do we have any closing remarks?
Mostly, I just, like, the Weasley dynamic is just, I just feel so real to me because I see a lot of my family in the Weasleys, and I love seeing, like, this is our first magical household that we see, so it's really cool seeing the differences from, like, how stark and, like, emotionless the Dursleys' house is compared to the Weasley, which is, like, bursting at the seams with magic and love. And yeah, just looking forward to Harry just having, like, a actual normal summer holiday with the Weasleys who actually care about him.
Yeah, people who actually treat him well, imagine.
Imagine that. In this series, impossible.
Okay, that's it for us. Once again, I'm Shay.
I'm Tori.
Don't forget to
subscribe if you haven't already. You can reach out to us on social media at potterrevisited or email us at potterrevisitedpodcast@gmail.com. And we will be back next time to discuss Chapter 4 of Chamber of Secrets, Flourish and Plots. We'll see you next time. Bye!